friends and viewers. Good evening. Etgar Keret. Etgar Keret was born in Ramat Gan and now lives in Tel Aviv. He's a winner of French chivalry and a lecturer. He had written a marvelous short story. The name of this short story is The Bus Driver Who Wanted to Be a God. The Bus Driver Wanted to Be a God by Etgar Keret. So this marvelous, interesting short story starts like this. This is the story about a bus driver who would never open the door of the bus for the people who were late. Not for anyone, not for repressed high school kids who'd run alongside the bus and stare at it longingly, and certainly not for the high-strung people in a windbreaker who would bang on the door as if they were actually on time, and it was the driver who was out of line, and not even for a little old ladies with brown paper bags full of groceries who struggled to flag him down with the trembling hands. And it wasn't because he was mean that he didn't open the door, because this driver didn't have a mean bone in his body. It was a matter of ideology. The driver ideology said that if, say, the delay that was caused by the opening door for someone who came late was just under 30 seconds, and if not opening the door mean that this person would wind up losing 15 minutes of his life, it would still be more fair to society, because the 30-second would be lost by every single passenger on the bus. And if there were, say, 60 people on the bus who hadn't done anything wrong and had all arrived at the bus stop on time, then together they'd be losing half an hour, which is double 15 minutes. This was the only reason why he had never opened the door. He knew that the passenger hadn't the slightest idea what his reason was, and that the people running after the bus and signaling him to stop had no idea either. He also knew that most of them thought he was just an sop, and that personally it would have been much easier for him to let them on and receive their smiles and thanks. Except that when it came to choosing between smiles and thanks on one hand and the good of society on the other hand, this driver knew what it had to be. The person who should have suffered the most from the driver ideology was named Eddie. He wouldn't even try to run for the bus. That's how lazy and wasted he was. Now Eddie was assistant cook at a restaurant called Stickway, which was the best pun that the stupid owner of the place could come up with. The food there was nothing to write about, but Eddie himself was a really nice guy, so nice that sometimes when something he made didn't come out too great, he'd serve it to the table himself and apologize. It was during one of these apologies that he met happiness, or at least a shot at happiness, in the form of a girl who was so sweet that she tried to finish the entire portion of the roast beef that he brought her, just so he wouldn't feel bad. And this girl didn't want to tell him her name or give him her phone number. but she was so sweet enough to agree to meet him the next day at 5 at the spot they decided on together, at the Dolphinarium to be exact. Now, Eddie had this condition, one that had already caused him to miss out all sorts of things in life. He wasn't one of those conditions where your adenoids get all swollen and anything like that, but still it had already caused him a lot of damage. This sickness always made oversleep by 10 minutes, and no alarm clock did any good. That's why he was invariably late for good work at the Stickway. That and our bus driver, the one who always chose the good of society over positive reinforcement on the individual level, except that this time, since happiness was at stake, Eddie decided to beat the condition, and instead of taking an afternoon nap, he stayed awake and watched television just to be on the safe side. He even lined up not one but three alarm clock and ordered a wake-up call to boot. But this sickness was incurable, and Eddie fell asleep like a baby watching the KD channel. He wake up in a sweat to the screeching of a trillion million alarm clocks. 10 minutes too late, rushed out of the house without stopping to change, and ran toward the bus stop. He barely remembered how to run anymore, and his feet fumbled a bit every time they left the sidewalk. The last time he ran was before he discovered that he couldn't cut gym class, which was about the sixth grade, except that unlike in those gym classes, this time he ran like crazy because now he had something to lose, and all the pains in his chest and his lucky strike wheezing weren't going to get in the way of his pursuit of happiness. Nothing was going to get in his way except our bus driver, who had just closed the door and was beginning to pull away. The driver saw Eddie in the rear view mirror, but as we have already explained, he had an ideology, a well-reasoned ideology that more than anything relied on a love of justice, on a simple arithmetic, except that Eddie didn't care about the driver arithmetic for the first time in his life. He really wanted to get somewhere on time, and that's why he went right on chasing the bus even though he didn't have a chance. Suddenly Eddie luck turned out, but only halfway 100 yards past the bus stop there was a traffic light, and just a second before the bus reached it, the traffic light turned red. Eddie managed to catch up with the bus and drag himself all the way to the driver's door. He didn't even bang on the glass. He was so weak. He just looked at the driver with moist eyes and fell to his knees, panting and wheezing. At this reminded the driver of something from out of the past, from a time even before he wanted to become a bus driver. When he still wanted to become God, it was kind of a sad memory because the driver didn't become God in the end, but it was a happy one too because he became a bus driver, which was his second choice. And suddenly the driver remembered how he had once promised himself that if he became God in the end, he'd be merciful and kind and would listen to all his creatures. So when he saw Eddie from way up in his driver's seat, kneeling on the asphalt, he simply couldn't go through it, and in spite of all his ideology and a simple arithmetic, he opened the door. Eddie got in and didn't even say thank you. He was so out of breath. The next thing would be to stop reading here, because even though Eddie did get to the Dolphinarium on time, happiness couldn't come because happiness already had a boyfriend. It's just she was so sweet that she couldn't bring herself to tell Eddie, so she preferred to stand up. Eddie waited for her on the bench they agreed on for almost 2 hours. While he sat there, he kept thinking all sort of depressing thought about life, and while he was at it he watched the sunset, which was a pretty good one, and though about how sheerly hoarse he was going to be later on his way back. When he was really desperate to get home, he saw his bus on the distance pulling in at the bus stop and letting off passenger, and he knew that even if he had the strength to run, he'd never catch up with it anyway. So he just kept on walking slowly,